So here we are, folks, once again with another wonderful interview with an independent filmmaker. Mike Hayhurst is with us, and we're going to talk today about And Through the Portal We Go, which, Mike, by the way, I love the title alone. So thank you for taking time to talk about it.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, as with all of my work, or the majority of my work, my wife and producing partner, Alison Moy Hayhurst, comes up with a title for all of it. So glad you like the title. Yeah, when she came up with that, it just clicked. Like, yes, that's the name of the thing. So.
And it was fitting. Once watching the film, I was like, that is actually very quite fitting for it. As I always usually start these out, if you wouldn't mind giving my listeners and viewers just a little synopsis of what And Through the Portal We Go is about.
Yes, so And Through the Portal We Go is about the last three members of a cult who get stuck in a time loop whilst trying to transcend to a higher plane of existence through a glowing portal in the woods. A little Groundhog Day meets Heaven's Gate, wherever that Venn diagram overlap is. We're right in that little sliver right there. So yeah, very funny, a lot of heart in there as well. And yeah, kind of fantasy sci-fi adjacent with that glowing portal, but yeah, that's kind of the world we're living in.
Yeah, a character-driven piece, feature film. Your first feature film, is this? Am I correct on this?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. First feature as a director.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, Matt, congratulations for getting a feature done. I know how challenging that can be.
It certainly was.
So, one of the things I wanted to start off, because I was thinking about it on my ride home today, was uh, cult. When you say cult, it has such, I mean, and for good reason, a negative connotation. It usually, I mean, people think of Jonestown, they think of of
Yeah.
Manson, they think of cult like that. So going into this, I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but this doesn't seem like that type of cult necessarily. I mean, they have their traditions and everything, but not nearly as dark as what you might associate with it. Were you trying to do a little bit of a different spin with this?
Yeah, I think, like you say, there is the connotations with the word cult, and we talked a lot about kind of this capital C cults, like the
Mhm.
big ones, if you like, and then also these kind of lower C cults. So things that, it's more community, it's more kind of, groups of people with a kind of, collective
Mhm.
interest, or, we're all working together to try and kind of better ourselves, live in a certain way, things like that. So there are things that, they are living up in the woods, kind of isolated. There's no phone line, there's no TV, there's all of those kinds of things. But also these are people who, are looking for answers. They're looking for ways to, live a more kind of truthful, authentic life and things like that. So I didn't want our audience to kind of come in with, okay, well, we know who these people are. We have to get them out, all this kind of thing. It's like, no, let's spend time with these people. These are, based on real, they're inspired by kind of real stories that, we spoke about with our actors.
Mhm.
We devised a lot of our dialogue. We improvised a lot on
Mm.
set. So, these were kind of very much grounded in our real life experiences. And not that we've ever been members of our own cults personally, but we have those things of,
Sure.
we could call out, whoever, like Soul Cycle is a little kind of cultish. Disney adults can get a little intense. These things that, on the one hand are very, it's just, yeah, just groups of people and friends
Mhm.
who, kind of share a similar interest. But when does that kind of tick over to, hey, this isn't working for me anymore. This
Mhm.
isn't, these answers that you kind of promised me, you're not really kind of giving it anymore. When am I better kind of looking elsewhere? And ultimately for our characters and our stories, kind of looking inward rather
Mhm.
than to those kind of rituals, to those kind of mantras that they've been living by for so long. So uh, yeah,
Def-
a nice little mix of yeah, different culty things.
Well, and also the fact that usually with cults, it's some nondescript, non-existent thing that they're worshiping, that they're looking forward to, like oh, this is when the world's going to end. We got to give away all our things. We got to go to this exact spot and location. And in this one, you actually do have a luminous portal in the woods that actually people go through. So I mean,
Yes.
it's not like this is a figment of folks' collective imagination. You do have this portal here.
Right, yeah, and that was a big kind of jumping off point for us, and I think kind
Mhm,
of living through, through that pandemic, through that kind of lockdown period, and kind of looking around at these kind of institutions that were kind of failing us in some ways, and I'm part of that millennial generation who, we've had however many number of once in a generation lifetime thing, like we've had a lot of that. And we've been
uh,
told certain things like, well, if you just kind of do this for long enough, then success will follow, things like that. And through that lockdown, say, hey, this is not necessarily working for us the way you said it would. And I was watching those documentaries. I was watching
mm,
The Vow and Wild Wild Country and Heaven's Gate and like all these things. And so it did strike me like, okay, well, what if the big lie that this leader is selling is actually a truth? That is the big
mhm.
truth. There is a portal. People have stepped through and transcended. They've gone, but I'm not. So is it me? Is it you? Like, why wouldn't everything else be true if that big thing itself was
Mhm.
true?
Well,
Yeah.
and I liked that message because I mean, especially now in today's world, the zeitgeist, whatever you want to call it, in the discussion is religion, organized religion, reevaluating the actual benefit for it, that it's not for everyone, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, and it doesn't necessarily, if you need it, you kind of address that here of do the folks actually need this? And if following your beliefs to the letter, as outlined in our book, we're following this letter, yet we still didn't achieve what we were told. Why? And I liked that question that you brought up here because I think it's something that people are afraid to talk about. I mean, what do they say at parties? Don't talk about politics or religion at parties, right?
Exactly. And I've, for a long time I've kind of felt the opposite. Like I wish, like, where do you go to have these conversations? Like I wish I could talk to family, like, hey, this, I don't know, House Bill resolution, whatever is like, how is that going to affect you? How does that
Mhm.
affect me? Like, how do we create a space where we can talk about these things? And this film, I don't, it's not a religious film, but it
No.
is a film about faith. It is a
Mhm.
film about community and yeah, where you place that faith and where you find yourself kind of drawn to certain things when you're looking for answers and just a way through the world, which is complicated enough without.
Well, and being truthful not only to others but to yourself is what comes through here because we watch each of our characters kind of go through this arc and this growth that would probably not have happened had they just ascended, but they don't ascend. So then they start actually calling into questions. But what I like how you play with here is that you never get the feeling that they're abandoning their belief, but it is evolving. And, I think, especially with ideas, I think that's the toughest thing for any human to do is evolve your way of thinking once you've got a set way of thinking and your characters have that conflict.
Yes. Yeah, and I think, just geographically, yeah, we were kind of up in, the Catskill
Mhm,
Mountains in upstate New York, and so for our characters, their worlds kind of started very large and then they kind of shrunk down when they got to this kind of cult compound. And then how do we kind of open them back up again when we only have three characters, when we only have, 83 minutes worth of running time? And like you say, it's very difficult to kind of to shift that way of thinking. And so yeah, I really tried to kind of play with that and to look at that, and I think our actors did a great job of
mhm.
bringing in these big ideas, but in very grounded, very natural ways without it sounding like, oh well, here's the message of this scene, here's the moral, everybody, go think about this when you get home.
Well, they felt like real characters, and I saw two of your leads actually are also have writing credits, and it sounds like it was a very organic production for you, how everybody kind of had input. And I think that is reflected on screen because these all feel like real people. They don't feel like, really strict cultists, and they don't feel like tropes either. And how challenging is that for that balance to have these folks come off as, like you said, not messagey, not a trope specifically in one specific category, but just be people. How big of a challenge is that?
That was a big challenge and a big kind of, again, another jumping off point for us. And all three of our leads are actually credited writers as well.
Mhm,
And I spoke to them early on about just kind of, yeah, life and kind of
mhm,
experience and growing up and like, okay, here's the world I'm interested in.
mhm,
How do we kind of populate that? And I knew I wanted to work with them, Taylor, Sarah, and Joseph,
mhm,
before we'd kind of come up with characters, before I had any idea for that. So one of the kind of early processes, I have a big theater background, a big kind of devising, background.
sure.
So I had them auditioned kind of self-tapes with three different characters. So they
Oh,
all
okay.
self-taped with three different people. And then from there, we kind of looked at, okay, well, there would be conflict between these two characters. And then,
Mhm,
we're working with that nice triangle. We've got
sure.
this, this group of three. So I knew I wanted a kind of a young child star type
Mm,
role. Like these cults will quite often try and get
right.
a face for this thing. And like, well, look how successful they are. Like you could also be successful if you just give us your $500 a month and,
Sure.
take the test or whatever it is. Um, so Taylor kind of lent into that one, and they drew on these some real life experiences and real life kind of family
Sure.
background, family history, or things like that. And I think from those kind of nine self tapes, if you like, I combined a couple. I kind
Mhm,
of, oh, that trait is really nice there, but could we move that into Sarah's character? So, we'd have more conflict or more kind of, things like that. And I think, within this, I'd written this 30-page outline, 30
sure.
plus page outline. Within some of those scenes, it was like, hey, here's a chunk. Let's just reveal that you feel like this. And we'd done those kind of, we'd had that time to put them into kind of rehearsal scenarios or kind of improvisation kind of scenarios.
Mhm,
So they were very kind of comfortable with each other, with these characters by the time we started rolling on set, which we had so much footage and so much material, which we'll
Sure.
we'll touch on that when we get to that. But
Sure.
in the moment, yeah, those performances are so grounded, so
Mhm,
natural. And it's a real testament to them and their work and their process. And yeah, very, very grateful for just kind of trusting me with that. It's not like you're coming in with a script and I know exactly what I'm
right.
saying and my blocking is crystal clear. Like, no, we're gonna just point a camera at you and trust you in this room to kind of come up with something.
Yeah, I know some actors like direction, and many actors like that when they're given a bit of freedom with their character to just explore a bit. And they all seemed very comfortable in their skin as far as their character goes. Like I said, they felt like natural people. And I also appreciate that a little bit of a spoiler, folks, but that you didn't build a romantic relationship between, because a lot of times we see where there's a dynamic like you have here, and you're either going to work in, someone just feels the need to throw in the trope or the common trait of, oh, these two are just going to connect, and there's going to be something a little more romantical, and then the other one's going to get jealous and it's going to cause conflict, and
Yeah.
and you don't have that in here. In fact, this film, folks, is going to be probably one of the most positive films I've watched in a long time, but not positive in such a cheesy way that it turned me off, because there have been some of those as well. And so, how do you do that? Because we are by nature cynical culture nowadays. How do you approach this material to give it a positive spin and feel without being preachy, without falling into those tropes of, oh, well, we got to have some kind of conflict. Yeah, love triangle. That's easy.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you kind of pointing that out and kind of noticing that. And I think for me, this was a film I was really interested in different types of community, different
Mhm,
types of family. One character speaks a lot about chosen
mhm,
family, and they left their home to join this cult
right.
and kind of follow this leader. And so, how do you look at different types of family and also different types of love? And like,
Mhm,
we have love between friends that we don't necessarily express all the time and express kind of openly because
Sure.
we do assume that it will become romantic,
Mhm.
which is not the case.
Right, right.
So yeah, I don't know, and I think just kind of trusting, within this kind of indie film world, this kind of, predominantly one location,
Mhm.
small cast, small crew, these things, just trusting that our audience has maybe a little more patience to kind of, go with this process. We don't need that scene one of like, okay, well, we know that this is a good person, but they have a
Right.
drinking problem, and then they're going to do this, and then we set this up, and we've got Chekhov's
Uh,
gun on the wall, and we know someone's going to get shot in the fourth act. I mean, just trusting that we can kind of sit with these people and
mhm.
really just go on their journey with them. And I think that's been a big kind of takeaway for me, and a big thing I've kind of been surprised with as we've watched this in kind of, packed
Mhm.
screenings is we all go on that journey with them, and we all, we relate to different characters at different
Mhm.
times, but we're kind of invested in the emotion of it as well. And yeah, that doesn't need to end up with a big old kiss at the end of after 85 minutes. And I don't know how my actors would feel if I had pitched that. I think they're two close friends now, but
Sure.
maybe the sequel. We'll see. We'll
Maybe
see what
maybe
happens
the
with them.
sequel. Well, and you mentioned that you wrote a 30-page treatment. It is a shorter film. For your feature, I appreciate that because I've seen in the past indie filmmakers taking on their first feature and sometimes feeling like they bit off a little more that they could chew. They have a very grand, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there is the what you have in your mind and the concept and what you can in reality do, and you seem to have kept it kind of reined it in a bit with a wonderful story in that and cast, but it does really rely on your characters. And so where did you find the cast on this?
So they had all been the three leads. So Taylor Dalton Curtis, I had directed him in a play, a short play
Hmm.
previously, worked with him on a short film previously, and so he's someone I've always liked his work, been a fan and a friend of his for a while. Sarah Gurka, who I don't think I'd worked with her, but I had again just been a fan of her. We'd been introduced through a casting director. She's now an agent friend. We'd kind of been in
Sure.
the same circles and things. And then Joseph Limas, who, again, known him probably a decade plus now.
Wow.
And again, always just a big fan. And we've never quite found the right project for us to work
Mhm.
on. And he's so busy. He's filming with HBO today or yesterday. So I don't know. He's very, very lucky. So when this came
Sure.
up, like the three of them, and I thought their dynamic together, like they'd met at kind of our parties and stuff. The three of them together just had a kind of chemistry.
Hmm.
And so part of this whole process as that first feature was a little reverse engineering, a little kind of, okay, let's be realistic. And I look, I love the ambition. I love those first time directors who are like, no, I
You're
need
right.
to raise 1 million.
Hmm.
It's going to be 2.5 hours. I love that ambition. I really, really do. My first cut for this was 2.5 hours before my producer was like, hey, this is not a 2.5 hour film. Could you do 85? And like, so, we trimmed down from there.
Mhm.
But I think just working with the three of them, and I think, yeah, just kind of trusting that I think we can hold this scene for,
Right.
10 minutes. I think I can hold this story in one location for this much time. And
Hmm.
I've been doing the festival thing for a while. I've seen a lot of feature films, I watched a lot of kind of first time features for
Sure.
and kind of prep for this. And I similarly to you, it's like, okay, this 2 hour film may not completely work, but
Right.
within that, there's an hour 40, which would have been great. And knowing that I had also kind of written this outline, knowing
Mhm.
that, I mean, I wasn't planning on editing, but I ended up editing. But knowing that I was kind of
Sure.
having to take a number of roles in
Hmm.
this, like, hey, let me just try and be really kind of brutally honest with
Hmm.
myself. And like, look, I love this moment. It doesn't move us forward.
Hmm.
So, we're going to trim that out. We're going to cut that back and try and distill it into the essence of what's actually kind of moving us forward.
And I will say, I think you accomplished that, and mad props to you to taking that step because I have seen my friends and I, because I've been on involved in some film festivals, some way, shape, or form, usually watching and helping judge for over a decade now. And there's some films where I go, there's a really good short film in here. You get
Yes.
like an hour and a half film, and you're like, man, if this was like 30 minutes, 35, this would be a banger, but you just went too long with this. Or even feature films that are like, wow, you went 2 hours. There's 90 minutes of really good stuff in here. So the fact that you were able to do that and be brutally honest with yourself, I say is, mad props to you because that is hard creating anything. And it's your baby, and you put all these hours, and like you said, you had all this footage, and you're like, and then you're just like,
Yeah.
ah,
Yeah, there's so much in there, Mark. There really is. And again, just like relying on our producer Allison, who,
mhm,
we just have that relationship of like,
sure.
okay, I'm gonna sit and watch this, and then I will tell you truthfully. Yeah, like, okay, well, if we trim that or if we move that to that, then you can lose, 10
Mhm.
minutes there. We don't need, and just like the shaping of it after the fact was kind of an extension of that devised nature of it, that improvised nature of it. And it doesn't help, I mean, it really did help that they're in a time loop and they're all wearing the same clothes for the entire thing. So we can kind of swap stuff around, and
Sure.
continuity is
And,
very, very simple in that
and
way.
and there you have kind of life imitating art in a way because you had to self-reflect on the film and go, what is the truth in this film, much like your characters.
And we were literally up in the woods, in the place where we shot. Yeah, I lived in this cult for a long, long time, and just looking at those three actors' faces on a screen for so long, I
Mhm.
very much felt like I was in my own time loop by the end of it.
Yeah, I could understand that going over scenes over and over again, but I think some of the more well-constructed indie films are ones where a filmmaker has given the project going, okay, here's my first cut. Give it to someone else to look at and go, be honest. Tell me what works and what doesn't. And you don't want to necessarily hear all that stuff, but at the same time, you're like, well, who am I making this for? Is I making it for yourself, or are you making it for an audience?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's such a collaborative, I mean, it's simultaneously very isolating, this work, and
Mhm.
also has to be collaborative. And you have to open that up. And I think there's always a vulnerability, when you hand over a couple of scenes to your composer, for example. And Judith Moy, our composer, I've worked with her on a number of our shorts together. And so when we put the team together for this, she was one of the first people to say, hey, it's the first one. I need you. It was her first feature as a
Sure.
composer. um, there's a real vulnerability, and like, hey,
Mhm.
here's 20 minutes. I think it's funny. I think you might need to help it get a little funnier. Please don't regret signing your contract and working on this thing. But then you take that, and then
Mhm.
she does a little work, and you think, oh, actually, with that, we don't need
Mhm.
that extra, that a couple of lines there, because we don't need to explain that now because your music is doing that for us. And so using that collaboration throughout post, as well as
Mhm.
the stuff on set, was really interesting, and not a process I've not done it like that before. So that's been
Well,
great.
working on shorts, I imagine, is different. Was there something, your experience in doing a number of shorts, was there anything that you experienced from your experience there that you carried over into your feature, certain practices, certain shortcuts of the way to do things? Was there, what did you bring from your experience for short filmmaking to the feature? What helped you, I should say?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think for me, shorts, I mean, my longest short before this one was, I think, 15
Hmm.
minutes, which, and even in there, you start to feel like, okay, the scene, it doesn't drag necessarily, but it doesn't have the same pace
Right.
as the other scenes. And so, just really kind of distilling things down. How long can this idea sustain itself? And 15 minutes for that thing was like, that was the tops. And actually, we've developed that into a feature, which is a horror-based thing, which I think you might really dig. So we'll come back to that. Um, but I think, yeah, kind of, but for this one, it's okay, well, scene by scene, like what's
Mhm.
the distilling that scene? What do we need to learn from this? What do we need to get to? What is going to be said at the end to drive us into the next thing. And then I think from there you start looking at, okay, a three-act structure. And
Right.
I very much kind of broke this down into three acts. And so, yeah, always kind of getting back to that. Yeah, what's the hook? What's the
Right.
core thing, not just for the act, but then the scene. And so you just kind of try and feel the rhythm of things like that. And I know, yeah, with our short films, there's a little more flexibility. Like this could be
Right.
5 minutes, it could be 10. No one really
Hmm.
cares. It's whatever. But I think for this one, yeah, is this 83 minutes? Is it 100 minutes?
Right.
There's a difference there, and it does
Hmm.
feel yeah, a little
Well,
different.
well, and especially like, as you said, it's pretty much one location, which you make the location feel very large still. So I will say
Thank
you
you. Yes.
you made it feel very large, but you got one location, three people, and a lot of dialogue. So you have to make that interesting for your viewers because I've seen sometimes where dialogue discussions go a bit too long to where, yeah, this is great. I got the idea. And it's 4 minutes later and they're still in the same room talking very similarly.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean we do have one scene. There's like a nice fire pit scene. We've
Oh,
tried
yeah.
some
Mhm.
we've tried some stuff. Everything's kind of, it's that kind of night of despair, that whatever that phrase is in your structure, that
Sure.
yeah, whatever they call that now. But like we finally give them an opportunity to kind of sit and really, yeah, reveal some backstory and share
Hmm.
some stuff. And I think that was one that I wanted to kind of earn that time. So
Right.
everything else, yeah, we did try and keep it pretty quick. We tried to keep moving, or when we come back to a setup, because we're in this time loop, keep
Hmm.
it different, keep it, there's a different joke, there's a different kind of punchline, a different button in some of those. So yeah, we didn't feel like, okay, we've seen this room and like we're back in this room. Unless that was like a deliberate thing, and
Right.
like with our characters like trapped in this space, it's like we
Hmm.
also start to feel a little trapped. So trying to earn that feeling and earn those moments compared to, yeah, let's just see something else. Let's go somewhere else.
Can only watch someone eat crackers so many times. No offense to anyone.
I exactly. Yeah.
So how did you film that though? With the repetition, did you do all the scenes? Try to do all the scenes in the same room at the same because you have the setup. Did you try to do it that way, or was it, did you come back to it for a while and give the characters a break from it? How did you go about structuring the kind of the behind the scenes of shooting this? Because I always
Yeah.
wondered
So
with repetitious ones, I was like, okay, how did they actually, what did they do? Just all of them on at once? And
yeah, and I can never kind of quite find an answer for that. And I think different
Mhm.
films have kind of tackled it differently. We only had 9 days to shoot this whole thing,
Okay.
so we did shoot shot by shot.
Mhm.
Well, as in like here's
Right.
the setup. Um, so yeah, like day one, Joseph walks down the hallway. He says something. Great. This is day one. First time you've done it. Great. Back to ones. Okay, this is day two. It's a little familiar, a little deja vu. Great, go. Day three, and we just ran it
Sure.
15, 16, 17 times, however many. And that was a big kind of a learning curve for me with our actors,
Mhm.
because Joseph was very much like, no, no, like what am I doing in this moment? I
Right.
I I can't think about, the last scene, the scene. I can't think about
Right.
anything else. I need this moment here. Taylor was a little more, okay, so I've just come from outside, and what has happened outside? Like, I don't know, because we're improvising that scene, but I assume you're going to say something like that. Okay, great. And then where do I go after that? And he needed a little more of that kind of filling in.
Sure.
But no, we just ran the same action, the same business, and then yeah, in the edit. I mean, I was kind of piecing it together as much as I could in the moment, and then in the edit, that was really the time to kind of put this jigsaw together. And so, and some scenes that we thought played in one way actually fit better
Better is
somewhere
the other way.
else.
Sure.
So, that was a little too frustrated. So we'll put that into kind of loop 3 or 4 or 5, and we'll put that one into the second. It was how 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 they kept it straight in their heads. I
Sure.
have no idea. It was a real, yeah,
Uh,
credit to them as actors for getting that done.
Well, the repetitious, I'm sure, helped as well for the later when your characters are getting a little tired of doing the same thing over. I imagine they had a little
Yes.
bit of extra motivation for that. That little help with real world feelings on
Oh,
it.
absolutely. We did have one kind of early rehearsal, early kind of workshop session, and I
Mm.
gave them like this logic puzzle, and I chopped this thing up and put it in an envelope, and I was like, right, you got 5 minutes to solve this logic puzzle. And so they'd start doing it, and then after 5 minutes, I'd shove it all back in the envelope and have them kind of
Do it
start
again, yeah.
again. And I think we got to a point, and as people, they just said, I'm out. I can't. I don't know what rehearsal you're calling this, but this is so okay. So that there, we're going to remember that. Yeah, we'll get that on camera. Those kind of very natural reactions to this stuff, and yeah, I mean, thankfully they just trusted me with that process, and there was real frustration at
It,
points.
it gave you a little gauge though as a director too, going, okay, I can do this many takes with this person before they
Yeah.
just say no, I'm done. Sorry.
And okay, so now's lunch. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's take lunch there, and yeah. Um,
Uh, so did you use a lot of the same crew that you've used on your shorts in the past, or for your background, your crew and that? Because 9 days, you got to kind of have a group of people that would say trust your camera person, your lighting, everything, because you've got to really like nail things down quickly.
Yeah, we were super small on this. I think, including myself and our producer, I think our crew was six and
Oh,
our actors were
hmm
three. So we kind of went the other way. Angelica Jacinto, our cinematographer, I'd
hmm
worked with her as a first AC on a couple of things. This was her first feature as well. Um, it was all of our first feature, and I think that was a big thing for me. And like, we this is the budget we have. We made the decision to we paid everyone the same rate. So kind of before Sing Sing was doing that, they did that recently. But like, hey, this is the rate. We can put you up close to the location. We can pay you 3 meals, 3 meals a day, and this rate. And so it was, yeah, people's first feature as well. So we were kind of all in this together, if you like. And it was, hey, we don't have much time for lighting. We're going to need to light a scene, and then because it's ultimately the same time of day each day, we're just going to need to kind of just keep running it.
Keep running it, sure.
Angelica had that main setup. She also gave me a second camera to kind of pick up some, details. Or if I started seeing something, oh, I think that actor's about to do something, I could kind of refocus that second camera on them. It was very, yeah, just kind of, I hate the word scrappy because that feels like slightly unprepared and a kind of on the fly. But we were very, very particular about how we structured everything
Sure.
in order to be able to make our days,
hmm
stick to that kind of 10-hour day. And yeah, like get it done in 9 days. It was
That's
kind of crazy.
that's
Um,
impressive. That's very impressive.
Yeah,
But
thank you. I mean, yeah, so yeah, I mean, on set crew, I think there were a lot of new
mhm.
kind of folks to us. Post-production, yeah, Judith Moy, our composer we'd worked with before. Um, Production design, Marcy Mars, who's an incredible kind of creative set dresser, art dresser, creative. I mean,
Did-
what she can do with kind of basically nothing is just incredible. And again, just been a big fan of her work. And
sure.
she couldn't be with us every day, but because we were
Mhm.
recessing
Right.
each time, she kind of set things up, and then our two kind of local PAs would take photographs of everything, and so they were just meticulous, and the kind of, well, the toast was actually at this angle. Like, cool, I don't know, but look, I
But
found out in the edit just how good they were and how much attention to detail they had. They did such a great job.
and that made it work because yeah, you're taking stuff off the shelves, you're eating food, you're changing things up each repetition as your characters get more and more tired of repeating the same day. Did she have some say in say the what type of things were involved in the rituals at all? Did you have all that worked out beforehand, or did your production designer go, coffee, use this for the coffee, or use it?
I mean the coffee and the avocado toast, that was me. That was my kind of
Sure.
millennial communion kind of, that kind of feel.
Sure.
But she had that outline. I was like, yeah, I need a plate, like I don't know, pick a ceremonial knife that they might have. And like just the research she was doing and the reasoning of like that particular kind of glass decanter for the coffee and things like that. She's a genius. So that side of things was very much kind of influenced by her. It was all very kind of, textures and very
Sure.
tactile, very kind of thrifted, I guess, in a lot of ways. And there is that kind of real aesthetic to, some of that kind of influencery,
Sure.
Instagrammy kind of, it's linens, it's wood, it's, all that kind of stuff. And she took that and ran with it to
Yeah.
build the world of this cult.
The house definitely has a very organic feel with the soft colors in the walls and the wood trim and the wood deck and everything. It was very
Yeah,
fitting.
yeah. Yeah, she just went out into the woods and would come back with logs and branches and like I think this is gonna work because I'm sure it will, Marcy. I trust you entirely. And I think some of it, we kept a lot of that stuff and like, oh yeah, I do kind of quite like that large wooden bowl. I'll put my fruit in that on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. What? Where'd you get the picture of the leader of this cult?
So our wonderful cult leader, Alison Moy Hayhurst, is our producer, my wife. I took my camera out to the front of the house, and then I think she went to FedEx Kinko's to print to print them. And we borrowed the frames.
Sure.
And then at the end of shooting, we gave those frames back. And I think they're up in someone's house right now, or at least kind of
Nice.
propped up in a spare
Sure.
bedroom or something. And like every now and again, they walk around the corner and it's, her face kind of
See,
smiling in the corner there.
and I'm going to say that picture helped, I think, because like, again, coming back around to the idea of cult, when you see her picture, you're like, oh, it's that type of cult. Okay, it's
Yeah.
you look at it going, okay, yeah, this doesn't really feel malicious at all. Just feels like a self improvement group looking to
Yes.
elevate themselves and improve themselves as human beings. Which, again, over the course of the film, we kind of see that self reflection. And I said it in my review, and I do truly mean that watching them realizing stuff in themselves did truly make me start thinking, well, you know what? Yeah. And I'm like,
And that's
wow. And I'm like, okay, this film did its job because
yeah, and that's something that kind of I wasn't necessarily kind of prepared for. And I
Mhm.
like very early on, we didn't want this, because it's 99% of the time it's a man, and then it's
Sure.
often it turns into a sex thing, and it's just like let's not do like okay, we don't want that. Like
Right.
we're very interested in the kind of matriarchal kind
Mhm.
of cult, and I think yeah, but we had one screening and someone spoke to us afterwards and like, hey, this reminds me of like a couple of moments in my life where I was in a situation and I couldn't
Mhm.
easily get out of that situation. And I hadn't kind of prepared myself necessarily for that. Just yeah, like how it touches you in different ways. And we
Mhm.
we don't explain much. We kind of drop you into this world and
Right.
then just let you kind of find your own kind of anchor points. And so yeah, to hear what people have kind of connected with and responded to has been really interesting. And yeah, people kind of losing touch with their daughter after they got married because they're kind of in this one particular type of group.
Mhm.
And if you're not in that group, they don't really talk to you that much. And like she was able to kind of understand it in a slightly different way.
Mhm.
And I just did not quite prepare myself for that type of response, which has been very inspiring. I think as a filmmaker and as a storyteller to be able to touch people that way. But
Well,
yeah,
especially when you didn't quite, that wasn't your full intention. But then again, you've worked with this, as I've talked to other indie filmmakers too. You work with the material so long, you get so with it that you soon lose kind of that outside focus of a fresh pair of eyes until you give to a fresh pair of eyes and they come to you and they're like, oh, thanks, I did this. And you're like, yeah, I totally intended it for it to be that. It's exactly what I was going for.
Yeah, I think there was a moment. I think when my in-laws saw it for the first time,
Hmm,
who are heavily involved in their church community and things
sure.
like that. And there's some. I literally called it millennial communion a few
Yeah,
minutes ago, and there's a moment there, and I think actually I don't mean any kind of disrespect by any of this, but
sure.
I kind of underestimate just how some of that language can be heard as potentially inflammatory or
Yeah,
whatever it is, which is not my intent,
sure.
but yeah, we do get so close to it, we I guess become slightly desensitized to what happens out in the real world when you are watching it for the
Right.
first time.
And but I mean that leads to another thing too, where I think the world in general, I think we've hit a point where it's a little too sensitive. It's like you mentioned, you kind of where are you going to have your discussions about politics and religion anymore, but at parties where you have a diverse group of people versus your own bubble, as it were. If you and people are we're all kind of prone, especially after COVID, to kind of stay in our bubble because we were in our bubble for a while, so we sought familiar things, and you find those familiar things that are very comfortable, and when you get outside of that comfort, you want to run back, and it's so easy to do that. And we even see that with your characters here. I think the first time that I really kind of chuckled and smiled was when Katie comes out and points to Craig, "Oh, you missed a spot," and kind of Craig's response, like he so wants to like, "No, I didn't," but he's just like, "Thank you," and he just kind of smiles, and it's like,
Yes.
no, have a discussion. You're like, but we're like that
Yeah.
now to where we, you're like, okay, no, I'm just gonna stay over here in my lane.
Yeah, and we're kind of, yes, we did the kind of the COVID bubble thing, and like we are now also just served that. Like
Mhm.
we are in this kind of perpetual, like I will just serve you the things that reinforce what you think
Right.
and like all this kind of thing. And so I think to come back to film festivals in person, to see, especially shorts blocks when they're programmed, there's a whole variety of things in there. And where is that space to say, hey, that's not been my experience? Like how have you landed at that kind of particular worldview? I don't know, and how can we kind of meet each other with curiosity
Mhm.
and an openness rather than, oh well, if you yeah, you know.
And you have that within your film. You actually have that demonstrated here, where our characters manage to have a discussion to get out of their comfort boundary and say, "Hey, look, I don't like you when you do this." And, they say it and try to approach it in a way that isn't insulting, which I think is lost the art of having a discussion without it getting personal.
Yes.
Nowadays in our real world, we see it all over the place in that, you watch any discussion, heck, IMDb reviews. I used to always laugh about how, before they restricted a little more and reviewed the IMDb viewer reviews, you'd watch a thread, and by the third post, it got personal, got political, and it's no longer about whatever movie it was talking about. It's just gotten into this kind of slam fest because
Yeah.
someone says something that they knew was going to irritate someone else. And so they fire back because they feel, rather than stopping and going, look, either ignoring it and actually getting back to the discussion at hand, or addressing it, going, that's not how I feel, or that's not the best way to put that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, again, that goes back to one of those kind of things for us, trying to avoid some of those tropes with these characters. How do we have kind of genuine, honest, slightly more nuanced conversation with characters on screen? How do we trust that our audience is going to kind of sit with that and sit with us as we go through
Right.
this? And then, when we've taken it out into the world, because God, yeah, letterboxd reviews are wild, Mark, as you know. And I,
Oh, letterboxes, yeah. All the critics who were on IMDb comments have now moved over to letterbox.
yeah,
Absolutely.
but it's tough, and this
Mhm.
is our first feature. It is a very personal story. It's very vulnerable. Yes, yes, yes. And so for every kind of, hey, this is what indie filmmaking should be, and this is wonderful and great, and I loved it, blah blah blah. There's a kind of, yeah, what was it? And like trying not to take that one personally. And
Right. Well,
it's like, and look, and I need to think for every, there's films that other people adore
right.
that for me, just I didn't connect with. So how do I
Mm,
have those conversations that are not dismissive of those filmmakers? Because just getting anything made is a challenge and it's hard, and like we should celebrate that in
mhm,
itself. I don't necessarily need to watch it a second time, and like that's
right.
fine.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And I've had films like that where I review where I'll start a review out going either I'm not the target demographic for this film, or this is not my type of film. Not necessarily saying that it was bad, but it just didn't connect with it. There's I very, very few films where I've actually like just gotten me angry. There's a couple that have gotten me angry while watching it, but for other reasons. But yeah, it's like film criticism. My wife told me that all the time, because I think whenever you're creating anything, even for my reviews, putting yourself out, once you put yourself out to the public, you have to prepare yourself for all variety of opinions
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
really, and it is hard. I mean, it's hard, human nature, especially when you're creative. Most creative folks are a little bit more sensitive and in tune and empathetic, and however you want to talk about it. But so those comments are tough to kind of just pass off. You're like, yeah, it's like, and then
Yeah.
without in the
Yeah.
back of your head going, wait, are they right? Should I have done this? What did I do? But you got to, like one indie filmmaker. I there's a friend of mine, Corey Edler. He said once the film's out in the world, it was no longer his. He goes,
Mm.
it is theirs, and he had to kind of separate himself, going, it's no longer my work. It's the people. It's out there. It's theirs now. I'm not touching it anymore. He made it. He owns it. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, and I think that's a good way to approach it. That once it's out there, okay, it's done. There it is.
Yeah, 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 and I love that, and it's the opposite in a lot of ways to I started in theater, and like with
Mhm.
theater, yes, you get to a point, and then you kind of lock the show, and like
Sure.
we're going to do it the same thing, we're going to do it the same way every night, but you could still you can nudge things a little if your audience is a little quieter. You can kind of you ride the relationship
Mhm.
with the audience is very different, and I think for film yeah, like they were saying, like it's not it doesn't belong to just me now.
Right.
It's out there, and I hope that it finds the people that would like it the most. But I guess to get to them, you need to
Sure.
go through a few,
Yeah.
whatever. And I really appreciated your review. And like you were saying, you generally kind of don't tend to review work like this. This was
Mhm.
a little gentler, a little kind of softer. And so I really appreciate your kind of trusting it and kind of going with it to kind of, get to that journey with it.
I mean, I'm not all horror and sci-fi, but that's what I lead to because that's what I grew up with. But when we get films like this, I do like watching them because it takes me out of my comfort zone, and I look at it, and sometimes they strike me like this one, and then there's other films where I watched where I was like, I always joked about the English Patient. English Patient won Best Pick. Everybody raved about it. I watched it and I was like, that was a grueling 2.5 hours. And I don't know. I'm like, mad props to people who could enjoy it. I just, that was not me, but I watched it. I
Yeah.
appreciated it for the technical aspects. I appreciated what they accomplished in performances and everything. But as far as the story or the characters, I was just like, yeah, I watched it.
I was in the room where it played.
I was there. I paid a ticket for it, and I think that doesn't mean that it's a bad film if it doesn't connect with everyone. And there's sometimes I think that feeling too of, well, if it doesn't, if not everybody enjoyed it, oh, there must be something. Not anymore. There is so much out there now that, you're going to find an audience that might not like it, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just, that's not the audience for them. That's not the film
Right.
for them.
Right. We're finding this kind of, becoming much more niche and like
Mhm.
these, channels and sub channels and all this kind of thing. And I think in a lot of ways that's made it harder, I think, as indie filmmakers
Mhm.
and creatives, but in another way, it's actually kind of opened up a lot more possibility. And I can think, again, I don't need to kind of, oh, well, what's the majority of people going to like? Like, what does the algorithm tell me to put
Right.
in this? Or what's the kind of, it's like, no, I can trust my voice. I can trust the voice of our actors. I can trust, if our composer likes this particular track and I like it, then there's going to be enough people out there to kind of find
Sure.
an audience for it.
Yeah,
And so
and
the
you,
possibility with that kind of really opens up, I think.
and just tell the story you want to tell, and that's why I love indie films, because 99% of the time they're making films like yourself that want to tell a story. You're not necessarily making it going, oh, I hope this is going to be a blockbuster hit and this is going to be picked up by, I mean, you would like to, don't get me wrong, but at the same time you're trying to tell a story that you want to tell versus necessarily making something specifically for money.
Yeah, and this was another a big thought that we were having. Like, this is, it's our first feature film.
Mm.
Let's make it for us. We only get to do this once. And yes, I would love those people to come in, and write me those seven-figure checks. I would
Sure.
love all that. And at that point, I will take your script notes and you want me to film this one scene in Tennessee? Great. We're going to Tennessee, like
Right.
100%. But for this one, like, let's tell our story and the way that we want to tell it, and really kind of feel liberated by that rather than, okay, well, now we need to start checking these boxes and those boxes, and we need to write a role for the executive producer's sister who is fine. She's fine. But would she be my first choice to cast there? I don't know. And
Yeah.
it becomes a different beast and a different
Right.
kind of thing to do, which, look, I very much look forward to having to deal with it if my career takes me in that place. But
Well, if you keep making stuff like this, I'm sure it will take you in a direction like that, for sure. And you mentioned another project. So you've got a short that you're developing into kind of a horror feature. Could you tell us a little
so
bit about that?
Yeah, I can share a couple of things. So there's two features we're developing. One
Hmm.
is a kind of odd couple buddy comedy set in the apocalypse.
Hmm.
These two women who are living in a bunker, called Turns Out It's the Apocalypse, We Think. Who Two wonderful creators, Natalie and Tara, who we've known on the film festival circuit for years, and
Hmm.
we've admired their work. They've been big fans of ours, and they kind of pitched us. It's their first feature that they've written. They pitched it to us at our world premiere back at Gig Harbor Film Festival in October. Like, hey, we'd like you to direct this, and we'd like Allison to produce it. Would you be interested? So then you nervously read the script, and like, I hope it's good.
Hope it's good. Yeah.
But it's a very, very good script. We're
Sure.
hoping to shoot that by the end of the year, which
Yeah.
is very
Mhm.
exciting. And then the other thing we have developed, we made a short film called Cook with the Heart,
Mm.
which is about the 1.6% of millennials who have turned to ethical cannibalism as a sustainable food source. Um, it's completely made up. That we made
Yeah,
that up,
yeah, yeah. No, I
obviously.
love that. I read the description of that, and I'm like, I need to see this short.
Yes,
I love that
that
theme.
yeah, there's wonderful. It started just as a kind of a weekend fun idea
Hmm.
that we kind of came up with. But yeah, this young millennial woman, she goes shopping, and her latest meal turns out he was a Michelin star chef. He comes back as a ghost to kind of teach her how to cook properly because she's a terrible chef. He's more offended by how he's being cooked
Sure.
than the fact that she murdered him in cold blood. So our writer Dan Titmus, wonderful writer
Mhm.
improviser, he's written a feature script for that. So
Nice. Nice.
that one we do need to raise a little more
Sure.
money for. We need some VFX in there.
Yeah.
We want to kind of pad that world out. But yeah, we play that in a mockumentary style,
Nice.
very kind of dry humor, very, very dark. And I think that was another one that until, we made this short, we used,
Sure.
bits of pork and ribs and stuff for
Yeah.
human
Yeah.
body parts and all that stuff. It was only when I watched the whole thing back on a big screen at a festival that I thought, oh, this is actually kind of disgusting. This is horrific. And we that kind of opened up the kind of the horror genre
Sure.
fests to us, which
Mhm.
for me, I just thought of it as a bit of a dark comedy, but horror festivals loved it. We weirdly got programmed in a food block at one festival. So
Nice.
before us was the history of a particular type of sandwich in Italy,
Sure.
and then there was us, and then there was something else. I mean, kudos to that programmer. I think it's the most kind of confident way of programming us. But no, that feature, yeah, we have that script. We're looking at the kind of the fundraising for that, for kind of finding the right partners for that. But yeah, very, very dark, bloody, dark comedy, body horror, just a very, and also a love letters of food
Food, yeah.
and again, kind of the community that you can find around food. And I guess
Sure.
that's, a big theme for my work is just community and
Community.
chosen family, whether you're eating people or whether you're, in a
In a
cult
cult.
in the woods. I think
I love your sensibilities with this. This is great. It's like on the surface, oh look, it's really great. And then, no, this is a cult. Oh no, these people are eating people. Oh.
yeah, one day I'm going to connect all these dots and need to talk to someone, I think.
No, your filmmaking is your therapy. There you go. So where can they keep track of where and through the portal we go is showing next? What's next here, and where can they follow all of that so they can possibly catch it at a fest or hopefully distribution?
Yeah, so and through the portal we go. We have our eighth festival coming up in a couple of weeks in Huntsville, Alabama, the Southern Fried Film Festival, which is a wonderful festival. I think this is their fifth or sixth year in North Alabama at the Low Mill Arts Theater Cinema something or other.
Sure.
But again, wonderful community down there. Some really great kind of filmmakers down there. Great creative people. All the accounts for that is at and through the portal we go. And then for myself and my small production company at Evening Squire is we kind of link everything through there as well. Everything else we've got going on. We've got some web series we've executive produced. We've got some Broadway stuff we're kind of tangentially involved in. We've got it's an eclectic slate of things that
you like to keep yourself open to different creatives ideas, not just one one lane, right?
That's it. And I think if the world is interesting, if the characters are interesting, we love it. We love that kind of just telling stories and sharing stories with the world and being able to just talk about stuff and share that. So,
well, thank you for talking to us about your film, Mike, and your filmmaking experiences and such. Appreciate it. Yes, folks, there'll be links for everything down in the body description of this video, and make sure you check it out at a fest where you can and keep track of Mike's work. It's very fun stuff, and thank you again for your time, sir.
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate it.